This morning, investors are on edge, fearing a repeat of Monday's Wall Street rout. The Dow Jones Industrial's plunging more than 2,000 points, its worst day of trading in more than a decade. That panic rooted in fears over the coronavirus and a crash in the oil market set off by a weekend price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia. That sent global crude prices diving as much as 30%. Now, the White House is weighing options to stimulate the economy. President Trump is set to meet with congressional Republicans later today.
Discussing a possible payroll tax cut or relief. We're also going to be talking about hourly wage earners getting help so that they can be in a position where they're not going to ever miss a paycheck.
It's not just the stock market. Americans are seeing the effects in all parts of their lives. Airlines have cut back on flights because fewer Americans are buying tickets, with demand expected to fall nearly 9%, potentially the country's worst year on record. Passengers sharing photos of empty seats on social media. From coast to coast, a growing number of universities are canceling in-person classes. The city of Chicago says canceled events will mean 100,000 fewer visitors this month. In San Francisco, there will be no group events at city-owned facilities for at least 2 weeks. With tip-off for March Madness just over a week out, the fate of the popular college tournament is up in the air. On the professional level, the NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball, and Major League Soccer all announcing plans to limit locker room access only to players and essential employees until further notice. As coronavirus anxiety sweeps the nation, also hard hit the TV and live entertainment sectors. Fans of Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy reportedly being notified that both shows will go without a live studio audience. The decision done primarily as a precaution to protect Jeopardy host Alex Trebek, who's battling stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So far, the shows are scheduled to tape again in mid-April. On stage, both weekends of the Coachella Music Festival in California have reportedly been postponed until October, while Madonna canceled 2 of her concerts scheduled for tonight and tomorrow in Paris. The rock band Pearl Jam following suit, announcing its postponement of the North American tour. The Seattle residents recognizing they're at the epicenter of the outbreak, telling their supporters safety is their priority. Back across the country, after a surge of coronavirus cases in Massachusetts, Boston's mayor has called off the iconic St. Paddy's Day parade there, following Seattle and San Francisco. And get this, even Dublin canceling their St. Patrick's Day celebrations. It is important, though, to put something into context, as we have great concern about the coronavirus. As it relates to the seasonal flu, so far we have, according to the CDC, at least 20,000 deaths this year alone, 20,000 and 136 pediatric deaths. That's a very high number and very concerning for medical professionals. Guys, back to you.
All right, Tom Costello. Tom, thank you.
Very important perspective as we go along here. And let's turn to this unfolding situation in California this morning. Cruise ship passengers potentially exposed to the virus are finally being removed from that ship, but it's not going easy. NBC national correspondent Miguel Almaguer is there on that part of the story. Miguel, good morning.
Savannah, good morning. With some 2,500 passengers aboard the cruise ship behind me, it's going to take several days for them to disembark. The long journey home, still a long way off.
Escorted by emergency teams in hazmat suits, the sick and elderly are among the first to make their way ashore after a nightmare at sea involving at least 21 people, nearly all crew members, testing positive for the coronavirus. The first wave of passengers from the Grand Princess cruise ship now set to begin a 14-day quarantine.
Not very happy. It's cutting into our daily lives. I have children at home.
When Rochelle Corley gets back on land, she'll head to a military facility like this one, some boarding a chartered plane overnight.
It's unnerving that we have to do this, but it's necessary to keep our family and our community safe.
With a soaring number of illnesses in a growing number of states, outside Seattle, where nearly 24 have now died, one hospital has opened a drive-through testing facility for employees who are worried.
They drive through, they stay in their cars, they roll down their window, and then we swab them.
At least one first responder testing positive for the virus after getting a call to a Washington state nursing home where overnight another 31 residents learned they contracted the virus. In Los Angeles, doctors urging those with underlying health conditions and pregnant women to avoid non-essential travel and public gatherings. In New York City, the mayor encouraging businesses to let employees work remotely, hoping to reduce crowds on the subway. The scare even reaching Capitol Hill. At least 6 lawmakers are now choosing to self-quarantine after they came into contact with someone who tested positive for the virus, including 2 who had close contact with the president in the last week.
I have not been tested for the coronavirus.
Has the president been tested?
So let me be sure and get you an answer to that. I honestly don't know the answer to the question.
The White House responding overnight, saying President Trump has not been tested, adding he has neither had prolonged close contact with any known confirmed COVID-19 patients, nor does he have any symptoms. President Trump remains in excellent health, and his physician will continue to closely monitor him.
With more passengers set to disembark today, the ship behind me could be here in port for a couple of more days. Many of the crew members are also sick, so they will quarantine out at sea. Guys, back to you.
All right, Miguel, thank you.
Greg joins the table. They're doing a lot over in Italy to contain this virus.
Moves. Hoda, Savannah, good morning. Good morning to you as well. Just days after Italy locked down a quarter of its population this morning, the entire country has been locked down. It comes after a sudden spike in deadly cases there. NBC's Matt Bradley has just arrived in Rome. Matt, good morning to you. What's the scene there?
Yeah, good morning, Craig. You know, it's almost the height of the tourist season here in Rome, and normally the Colosseum would be packed. But, you know, the world is still watching Italy. They want to know if this unprecedented lockdown is actually going to work.
This morning, Italy on lockdown. All 60 million residents now advised to stay home as much as they can. After the death toll from coronavirus jumped to 463 on Monday, almost 100 more than the day before, making it the worst hit country after China. In an unprecedented move, the entire country declared a zona rosa, or red zone. Church masses, sporting events, and special conferences all canceled. Schools now closed until April. So what is open? Italians can still go to work. Restaurants, stores, and coffee shops open as well, but only until dusk. Residents told no crowding together, to stay about 3 feet apart.
I'm staying 4 or 5 feet away from people, and hand sanitizer and masks.
This was the scene at a local supermarket, people stocking up just after the announcement was made. As for travel, Italians with a valid work or family reason that cannot be postponed will be allowed, but they'll need a document explaining where they're going and why.
Hey, Matt, what was it like actually getting to Rome?
Yeah, you know, Craig, I actually flew from the States last night, about an hour after this announcement was made. It was a little touch and go. I thought they were going to cancel the flight altogether. It went ahead, and actually one of the flight attendants told me that this was the last flight that American Airlines was going to be flying to Italy in quite a while. So when I got here, the airport was deserted, and I was kind of surprised. You know, there weren't any extra screenings for any of the arriving passengers. Maybe it's a little different for those who are taking off, but that's what I saw, Craig.
All right, Matt Bradley, Force there in Rome. Thank you, Matt. Be careful. Be safe.
You can see there's a lot of moving pieces here. There's a lot of bad information out there. We want to make sure we're giving accurate information and keeping it in perspective. For that, we go to Dr. John Torres, who's here. And Dr. John, I mean, you know, coronavirus is a new virus. It's novel. That's one of the reasons why there's so much focus on it. But we have learned a few things in the last few months. What's the status of the best information our officials have on its onset, on how it's transmitted, its gestation?
And you're right. You're right. Information is everything right now. We're learning a lot more that we didn't know 2.5 months ago when we first started looking at this thing. As far as when symptoms come on, we always said, yeah, it looks like about 14 days, so let's quarantine people for 14 days. Well, a new study just came out saying that half the people that get coronavirus will get symptoms within 5 days. Almost everybody will get symptoms within 12 days. And that's why it's important to have that 14-day incubation period to give a couple days on the end just to make sure. So people that sit there at day 10 going, I feel okay, let me go ahead and go downtown, not the thing to do.
talk about it being transmitted through droplets, basically, and a lot of people wonder, like, will it live on a pen? How long could it live on a cup? How long does this virus live on surfaces, from what we know now?
And that one we're still trying to find out. But what we think is happening so far, the information we've gotten over the last couple of months, is that on surfaces it's not going to live that long. We're talking minutes, maybe a few hours at the most. In some cases, you hear them saying, a couple days later they can find examples of it. They can find samples where it is. Those aren't necessarily live virus. Those are just parts of the virus they're finding. But what we also know is that most of this seems to be spread through the respiratory droplets, people coughing and sneezing. It's not often they get it from touching surfaces and touching themselves, but it's still important to wash your hands. Extremely important thing to do.
Warm day here in New York City yesterday. We expect it to get warmer over the next few weeks. There are a lot of folks who have been suggesting that perhaps when it warms up, we'll see fewer cases of the coronavirus. Any truth to that?
Well, the experts are saying, they're kind of keeping their fingers crossed, saying we hope that happens, but at this stage, since it's so novel, it hasn't gone through a season, we can't tell. Other coronaviruses have done that. This one might, but again, it might come back as well.
People reading the internet have probably seen threads or information about shortages, about hospital bed shortages, about medical device shortages. What's the reality there? I mean, if you see an incidence of coronavirus, even a conservative estimate, do we have the facilities and the equipment to handle it?
And probably the biggest concerning one are the ventilators that we have out here, because it is a respiratory virus. So if people get to that stage where they need ventilator support because they're not breathing very well, a recent study a few years ago said there's only 62,000 ventilators in this country. So you can imagine if there's 100, 150, 200,000 people, some choices are going to have to be made as to what to do with the people that can't be put on those ventilators. And those are going to be tough choices. Right. So hopefully it doesn't get to that stage. And they're saying that they're going to try and get companies to basically start making more ventilators if we need them.
But perspective, most people who get the virus
the vast majority of people won't get to that stage. It's usually the elderly or those underlying health conditions.
And how long before a vaccine is your best guess?
A year to 18 months still.
Okay. All right, Dr. Torres, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.